Pricing is directly connected to how much value you perceive of yourself. So what you're able to command as a price is directly connected to how much value you carry as an individual, you see, and you're able to communicate. So typically, once people think about pricing, the first thing they're thinking about is, oh, how am I going to set this kind of price? How am I going to charge this high? How am I going to, get this kind of clients? How am I going to get people that are going to pay me a lot of money, right? It's the typical way, and it's understandable. However, it doesn't work that way, right? Because what gives you the ability to command a certain amount of value is how much value you believe that you already carry or you believe that you can provide. Because it's all value, right? You're bringing your time, you're bringing your skills, and in exchange for that, you want money, right? So you're giving value for you to receive value. But if you don't have that value, if you don't believe that you have that value, if you're not confident in that value you actually bring, if you're not able to communicate that value, if you haven't, you haven't understood it, if you haven't, if you haven't understood it well enough to be able to communicate it, then it means that you can't actually bring in the value that you desire. Obviously, so it automatically means that if you want more, if you want to be able to command higher pay or higher income, the first step is not to think of what is coming in, but what you are actually bringing out, what you are actually giving. So many experiences. I would say, first of all, every time you need to make a change in your pricing, there's almost always going to be that fear of, will people still desire or book these services? And that's why it's important to don't make an emotional decision around, your pricing and just moving from A to B, right? It should be a thought out process. You should, of course, calculate your costs, calculate, your cost of business, your cost of service, your cost of your own personal cost, depending on the business model that you're working with or you're running. Those costs are one of the major factors that will drive any change in price, at least understanding what your costs are. Because with that understanding, it makes you know that, what, a particular price I have set is not even meeting this cost. Now, being profitable is an entirely different thing. But the very basis is you should be able to break even. You should be able to set a price that allows you to meet the cost of your doing business, the cost of providing the service, and your own cost of living. So once it's not an emotional decision, at least you're able to have that confidence to say, okay, there is a reason for this change. Now, there are times in the past, I remember a particular time when we had to raise our prices. Now, first of all, I was already very scared because I was just like, oh my God, raising price, what impact is that going to have, on the client? How are they going to feel about it? I went back and forth with myself. It was like a battle, internal battle, but I knew that it had to be done because I knew the kind of business model that we're building, and I knew what it would take us to provide the kind of service that we wanted to provide for our clients. However, I still battled with those fears, those, imposter syndrome, like, are you even worth, charge or commanding this amount of value? And I had to address that, and say, why are you feeling this way? And remind myself of why it's important to make this move and the benefits it will have on the business in the long run. Now, the first thing to understand is when you raise your prices is there's most likely going to be a waiting time. It's not an automatic thing. Like, you don't just raise your price from maybe A to D and you just imagine that the clients come flooding in. And that's why you need to be very strong on your convictions around, this is why it is time for me to do this, and it is, this is why I have to do this at this time, because there's going to be that waiting time. There are people that are already used to you at a certain price. They need to be reconvinced again why they should pay more, right? Because they have already seen you, they've understood your value at a certain price point. Demanding for more, it's a little different. Now, for some of those people, they might eventually come up to understanding why. And that's why even when you're communicating that, you're not just communicating that I have raised my price, you're also communicating the higher value that your business is also going to be providing, so that, it's a win-win situation. But have the understanding that everybody is not going to continue with you. All your clients will not continue with you when you shipped. And that's okay. So in the waiting time, there is going to be a waiting time. It's how patient will you be through that time? And how deliberate are you now going to be about what you will do in the time while you are waiting? Are you going to start marketing? Are you going to start reaching out to newer people? Are you going to start building your portfolio afresh? Are you going to start doing things that you have never done before, showing people how your brand has the refreshment, or how your brand has changed or has evolved, so that you start to attract newer clients, right? That your work or the stage or the level at which you are operating now is now attractive to them. But I think the mistake most people make is they're a little impatient, right? Through that waiting season, because it can be tough. You move from booking 10 people to just book one person in 2 months, and it's like, ugh, I cannot deal, right? But everybody goes through it. That's the truth. Everyone goes through it. So you can't make an emotional decision around pricing. It must be a business decision. And when you make that business decision, you must communicate it, right? In a way that also shows that you are increasing your value, right? You must also think, what additional value am I going to bring to my clients now that I have changed? And you almost understand that everybody's not going to go with you. All your former clients might not move with you, and that's okay.